Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is a public meeting related to commercial cannabis business permitting. Today we're going to be considering the application of Coastal Delivery Services, LLC, Coastal Distribution, LLC, and Coastal Manufacturing, LLC for three different operations as described by their name at a location of 819 Reddick Street. I will start the meeting, but I want to give a little bit of background as to why we're here. In December of 2017, the City Council adopted an ordinance to add Chapter 9.44 to the Municipal Code to permit and regulate commercial cannabis businesses in the City of Santa Barbara. In January of 2018, then, the Council took action to establish the application process that we're undergoing here today to be used for any kind of commercial cannabis business, whether it's manufacturing, distribution, indoor cultivation, delivery, or storefront retail. They also established the criteria that city staff would use to evaluate the various proposals that we receive. So in February of this year, the city opened up a competitive process. And we are we have scored each of those applications once. The applicants that achieved a high enough score have now moved on to the next phase, which is this public meeting. The purpose of this meeting is twofold. The first is, and most importantly, it's for members of the public to understand more about your operation, your proposal, your site, and the way that you plan to do business. That'll also inform city staff's perspective as well. The second purpose is for city staff to be able to ask you questions on your written application. Just one more quick piece of background for those in the audience or viewing this on television. This proceeding is a little bit different than other actions and public meetings that the city normally conducts. In a typical land use application, for example, a member of the public is privy to a lot of information about a particular site or use or proposal. There will be a staff report, there might be environmental impact reports and various analyses. In this case, that is not the case. And so for obvious reasons, in that we're in a competitive process and your proposals are full of trade secrets and confidential information and frankly information that would potentially give a competitive advantage to somebody else. In the case of storefront retail, the City Council adopted a limit of 3 storefronts, retail businesses for the city. For the other types, such as manufacturing, distribution, and delivery only, there is no limit, but you are trying to achieve a score of at least 900 out of 1,000 points. And so we are going to spend quite a bit of time here today giving you an audience and quite a bit of time to be able to talk to the public and really get into the details that we were not able to make available. So in terms of the information that is available, if somebody wants to understand more about this process, the first is the actual commercial cannabis business ordinance that the City Council adopted. It is listed, or it's available at that link there under the first bullet point. The application process and the criteria that city staff are using to evaluate and score these proposals and what you're trying to address is available at the application process link. We have a list of all of the proposals that have made the first cut and have moved on to this public meeting. This is the second of 2 public meetings. We held a public meeting for the storefront retail applications last Friday. That's available for viewing online. And then we're doing this for the non-storefront retail today. But that map there of all 8 proposed locations is available. We also have it in the back of the room here, so you can see where they're all located. For those here at the public meeting today that wish to give public comment, you're free to do so. We encourage that. Please just fill out one of the green speaker slips that's there on the ledge, and you can bring it up to me. When we get to the time in this public meeting for public comment, I'll call you up. You can stand at this podium and you'll have 2 minutes to give public comment. We will also take written comments 2 different ways. One is through U.S. mail, the P.O. Box address up on the slide, as well as through a dedicated email address that we've set up specific to this purpose, and that is ccbpea@santabarbaraca.gov. And so if anybody here in this room or out viewing this remotely would like to submit public comment, you're free to do so. So the way that this meeting will run today, following the end of my introduction here, we will then turn this meeting over to the applicant team, and you'll have 30 minutes to address both city staff and the public here. We'll then have a question and answer session where myself, and my name is Matt Four, I work in the city administrator's office, and Tava Ostringer, the assistant city attorney, will then ask you questions about your proposal. Then we'll turn it to public comment, and as I said, if you fill out a speaker slip, you'll have 2 minutes to give public comment. It's one-way communication, so you'll give your public comments. I may ask you to respond to a comment, and then following that, I will turn it back over to the applicant team for a 5-minute summation or conclusion. Is that clear? Okay. So again, thank you. So again, we're talking about 3 different applications, one for delivery only, retail delivery only, one for distribution, one for manufacturing, all proposed by the same team at one location. And that location is 819 Reddick Street. And you can see that, excuse me, that Reddick Street is bounded by Nopal Street on the east, Milpas to the west, and East Haley to the north. And this is a photo of the actual building and one of the entrances. And with that, I'll turn it over to Coastal. And you'll just use the arrow keys to advance your slides. And whenever you're ready, you'll have 30 minutes.
Thank you, Matt. My name is Julian Michalowski. I'm excited to be here to introduce our companies at 819 Reddick Street. The companies we're proposing at Reddick, as Matt said, are distribution, delivery, and manufacturing. We are not proposing retail, and we're not going to have customers. I do see that a lot of our neighbors are in here today. We hope to answer any of your questions or concerns you might have. Our goal would be to be neighborly and compliant with all of you. So if there's any questions that we can answer, we'd be happy to do so. The vision that we have as a company is to be vertically integrated here locally in Santa Barbara. The majority of our ownership here, 85% of it, is owned locally by Santa Barbarans. And just to give you a quick background of Coastal, when Prop 64 passed, we as a team wanted to be to enter the cannabis industry, and we quickly realized that you needed a diverse team. It wasn't just a one person that's able to pierce this industry, and there's a lot of learning. And so what we did is we hired an attorney, Alyssa Stewart, who is a leading attorney in California for compliance in regulations in the cannabis industry. Alyssa connected us with Josh Ginsberg, who's here with us today. He's a partner and head of compliance. He founded a company called Native Roots. Native Roots is the largest vertically integrated recreational cannabis company in the world. What we'd like to do today is introduce the team so you know kind of who we are as we speak. And then from there, we'll get into the different businesses and try to create an understanding for everybody in the audience.
Hello, everyone. It's good to be back here again. Thank you for having us, and thank you for your time. Like Julian said, we're here to continue the chain for our vertical integration for our company that's going to be based here in Santa Barbara. My name is Malante Hayworth. I'm part of Coastal here. And Coastal, like Julian had said, is 85% locally owned here. So we care about the community. We want to make this our headquarters. So we want to make sure that we're going to build a business that's going to be strong here, and it's going to help Santa Barbara in tax revenue and just help the community to give back to the community through Coastal. But Julian, go ahead. Continue about yourself.
So again, I'm Julian Michalowski. I came to Santa Barbara to go to UCSB. During UCSB, I played rugby. After school, I got into real estate. My background is real estate investments and developments here in Santa Barbara County. Each year, we employ hundreds of people. I've been a local business owner for 10 years. We provide housing through our companies to over 60 families here in Santa Barbara. We participate in low-income housing. My office is on Carrillo Street. So our focus here today is to explain that you have good stewards of this community coming forward, and we're asking for you to believe in us as your next cannabis company here in Santa Barbara. And we look at cannabis and community as one.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kimberly Jones, and I'm thrilled to be a partner of the Coastal team and also to be a resident here of Santa Barbara. 3 years ago, I moved to Santa Barbara with my 3 children, whom attend Laguna Blanca, and we moved from Newport Beach, where, just to tell you a little bit about my background, where I started a special needs school for autism, specifically for my oldest son. I partnered with a autism specialist where we were able to develop an educational platform that we felt better assisted these special children in the process of learning, which was something more than the district could do. We started oh gosh, I lost the word. Well, it's a school, but we were able to take children in and do fundraising within the community to help financially support the school. Later, I then purchased and owned and managed a popular local restaurant where I needed to go through the whole liquor license processing and the compliance with the ABC, which, of course, as you know, is vital to maintain any liquor license and keep the doors open to any restaurant. My diverse background has led to help starting Coastal, and I'm excited to bring my vision to the team.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for having us back again, Matt and Tava. And thank you, Santa Barbara, I guess, for allowing me to come from Colorado, and these guys for asking me for my experience and allowing me to share the experience and all the ways I've learned things not to work over the last 10 years that I've been in this industry. As he said, as Julian said, I co-founded Native Roots Dispensary, which we are the largest retail cannabis company in the industry. We're fully vertically integrated, so we do all of our own production, all of our own production as far as growing. We do all of our own manufacturing for edibles and vape pens and extracts and everything that we will be proposing to do here in the manufacturing facility. We produce about 130,000 grams a month, so that kind of puts in perspective of how much we are actually doing. I started the business in 2009. My badge number is number 54 out of over 80,000. The badge is issued by the Marijuana Enforcement Division in Colorado, so the government body that oversees the industry. So I was the 54th person that has got to learn all these lessons along the way. So be them good, be them bad, be them indifferent, whatever they were, it's been a long road and a lot of lessons learned on how we want to do things and how we don't want to do things moving forward. And there's a lot of stuff that I've seen that we can take to make our company just that much better of a place to work in and that much safer of products that we can produce for the consumers and for the end users. And that's really, in the end, we want the most compliant and safe products, and it's taken a long way to get to finding out how to do it perfectly or as close to perfect as possible. It's kind of how I feel Colorado has really nailed it down at this point. So the company has about 700 employees. We have 20 stores, so it's a huge network, and there's just a lot that we've done throughout that whole time. Not only do we manufacture all of our own products, not all of our own edibles, but we create topicals, tinctures, beverages, gummies, vape pens, packs, Lord Jones, Mark Ha. We have a lot of brands that are very recognized in the industry that we produce. But we also, through this huge network, we've built a large distribution internal company that takes it takes a lot to feed 20 stores with the amount of different products that we do, and to keep that distribution network running just for ourselves has taught us so many things on how to do it correctly and safely and compliantly for our company to be successful. So the idea is to bring all of that here, skip all of the last 10 years of hardship that we've been through, and take all these great new, everything we've learned and how great it is that we can make it perfect for Santa Barbara. And I look forward to spending a lot more time here because it is beautiful. I thought I loved Boulder, but this is really nice. So.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Nick Easley. I'm CEO of 3C Consulting. Originally from farm country in Wisconsin, was a service-connected Air Force disabled veteran and got out of the service in about 2006. Randomly came to Colorado to a pretty place, and cannabis was legal for medical. So I went from like VA medications to cannabis, and personally, so I'm like, this is really helpful for people. But the farmer side of me was really scared when I saw how many operations were actually cultivating or processing and selling cannabis. It's actually more dangerous, just the processes of, let's say, pesticides or solvents or theft and robbery versus the plant itself. So I started a small little agricultural consulting company that's gotten larger and larger. We've now worked in 26 states and almost 10 countries. Thanks for having us back here. I live down in Topanga, Colorado now. We have offices around the United States. Even though we're Denver-based, we got to be the guinea pigs of this industry of, even though your medical program is older than ours, 1996, California with the Compassionate Care Act, the first state to say patients deserve safe and deserve medicine legally. And then right behind us a few years, but now you get to piggyback on our learning and specifically what not to do. In regards, last week I was in South Africa with the Medicines Control Commission, also in some of our European operations. So we've had to deal with some of the highest global standards possible when it comes to food production, safe products, labeling standards, good agricultural practices, manufacturing practices, good distribution practices. So when we get to come and do this for California here, it's really an honor. Our consulting company helps teams typically with licenses, but when we found this group, we realized this is something we could actually hang our hat on. So by having operators here close, I wanted to introduce Ben as well before I get into more of the company, who's one of our accounts manager here for Coastal as well.
Thanks, Nick. My name is Ben Condren, here with 3C Consulting representing Coastal. It's a privilege to be here again. I was here last week for the dispensary interview, so I'm really happy to be here again in front of you all today for Coastal Distribution, Delivery, and Manufacturing. I'm local to Southern California these days. I'm originally from the Boston area, and I've worked in licensed cannabis businesses coast to coast. So I'm bringing some of my experience here to Santa Barbara to do things right. So thank you again.
Perfect. So I wanted to segue into the business. We also couldn't have Kenny here today. What I found over the years is without a good community, you can't have a business. I mean, the community is where our staff comes from, where most of the people that live here. So we really want to make sure that we maintain those good relationships with the community here locally. Going through this business, when we think about what is Coastal, and having, hopefully here a dispensary license in Santa Barbara and a few throughout the state, I really saw a lot of value as, the farmer in me. I can't make high-quality products without high-quality, abundant supply. And Santa Barbara County has the most licenses for compliant, to-date operators here in the state of California. Great agricultural climate, and you don't want to pick a tomato and ship it halfway across the state, dry it out, and then try to make salsa later. So being close to the source is a really wonderful opportunity, but also an amazing responsibility to think of who's going to be doing this, because the products made here through these distribution, delivery, and manufacturing licenses can end up in almost every single store in the state pending a few House bill changes here coming up. So when you think about this whole process, you have 3 businesses: independent ingress, egress, safety offices, restrooms, facilities, and vaults. These businesses have to operate under a very complex licensing framework from the state of California, which went from the most non-compliant to moving towards one of the most compliant industries. That history here of many non-compliant operators, it's one thing that's going to set Coastal apart. We're not starting with bad habits. When you start with a good, clean foundation of a company with all of its accountability, metrics tracking, safety and quality assurance standards, you're not exposed to the vulnerabilities or liabilities or threats of security breaches, unsafe products, and potentially unsafe working conditions. So essentially, our distribution company can pick up raw plant material, or RPM, the feedstock for our extraction company, quarantining it in its own vault, and then selling that to our manufacturing company. The distribution company can also pick up flour or other products from other manufacturers in the state, bring that to their vault for testing and quarantine processing, and distribute those throughout the state. It could also then pick up products made from our manufacturing company to distribute to our dispensary or to other dispensaries throughout the state. So those 3 licenses, they operate independently as individual companies, and the same ownership structure, but from our vice president of operations and down, each have their completely own financials, ingress, egress, keypads, and all of their compliance requirements. To focus on delivery, that's the one that you can kind of think of like a pizza delivery company. This is a new concept that a few states have worked on over the last few years, and California has a very incredible system for compliance and regulation for this that they've allowed. The problem is we've had many examples in California of not compliant or illegal delivery companies just delivering to anywhere in the public or to events or not checking IDs or listing on weed maps or Leafly as a delivery company that doesn't have local licenses, doesn't have business licenses, isn't paying taxes. You saw some big ones in Los Angeles pop up that were shut down with $10, $20 million of investments behind them. But now these new local licenses allowing us to actually deliver medicine for medicinal patients or adult use consumers for responsible consumption to their house. So by bringing this just like wine delivery, like checking every single person's ID, if they're 80, if they're 21, and only delivering to places that we can deliver, the laws here allow the longest, most open business hours we've seen for delivery, which we're still not sure if we will be delivering 24/7, 365, but as the market really dictates, we'll determine how to best use delivery. We found in other states delivery is limiting like 40 trips per year for average users. So when you think about Santa Barbara car-free and some of the initiatives here to be an environmental city, bringing the store to someone's door in a safe and compliant manner is not only good for business, it's safer for the community and not going to create constraint points downtown like maybe on State Street or Chapala, some of the other proposed dispensary locations. The delivery would have its own vault with products delivered from our distribution company, logged in, and then when there's an order, that car would then leave, go to the point of sale, check IDs, transport manifest logs, and then return. And through very automated new technological applications, we can actually do payment processing, tracking, and accountability through an app, so it's not just someone paying in cash and creating additional liabilities and security exposures where that point of sale is happening. We actually give incentives typically to reduce that, so if you don't pay cash, we'll actually incentivize that. When it comes to the other businesses, when you can see, like literally bringing the store to your door, by limiting the amount of transactions in dispensaries, it's something that you've seen with Uber Eats, that there is a demand, or with Domino's Pizza, not everyone can sometimes come to get their products, and especially for the medical that are homebound, we want to be able to provide that service here locally. We do use armored vehicles. Typically, this is kind of just here for reference. We want to protect our staff. We want to protect our clients. We want to protect the community. We won't do business if we are going to create some sort of liability. Some of the things that Josh and I have seen working with hundreds and hundreds of cannabis companies around the United States and world is that sometimes bad things happen where a delivery driver or a security officer might have some sort of issue. With every instance of a security violation in Colorado and from these other states, we analyze that and revitalize our security plans in each market we go into to continue to make those better and better. Security is that main piece, and there's so much backup security systems with technological kind of tracking that it's not just taking hand notes when you're transferring products. And as you can see on the organizational chart, we've already looked into you have a greatly highly skilled workforce here. So we were looking for people with UPS experience, with delivery experience, retail and consumer experience, for how to actually do this best. So you can see some of the local community members there that we've already vetted for some of these positions. When you think then about distribution, this is one of my favorite license types in the state of California because it finally closes a very dangerous loophole in the industry. Producers typically would provide their own samples to labs. And let's just think about Volkswagen, for example. That wasn't the best idea to do your own in-house testing. By actually having someone taking the samples, quarantining the product, taking all of the tax payments, that 15% tax at that point, it's our distribution company that's mandated to collect that. When you're thinking 15% of potentially $100,000, that adds up with a lot of clients. So it's our mandate from the state to actually, with the Bureau of Cannabis Control, to actually pay those taxes for those purchases. So one way to guarantee better revenue, but that's a highly secure and risk area. So we have to make sure that this company that's picking up products, picking up plant material, maintaining that at medical standards and food grade standards during transit, securing that, and if a product's not allowed to be sold, it has bad test results, it's our responsibility to return that to the producer or to destroy that and make that unrecognizable on site. This distribution company equally would be picking up things potentially from around the state of California, being able to bring small, close to organic local flower from, let's say, up north in Humboldt from a licensed producer to our facility. Once the testing results are passed, we can then distribute that to other dispensaries, our network of dispensaries, or if it's raw plant material, trim, or feedstock, then sell that to our manufacturing company to then manufacture bulk oils, distillates, and products. Once our manufacturing company makes products, we don't just sell that to our dispensary or take that to another dispensary. Like with our products, we can actually have them in all of these other dispensaries through this sort of company, but we track every single product. And the only thing that's ever moving from this company or from a manufacturing company out, individually prepackaged skewed units from 1 gram up. So they're all labeled, tested, child-proof, odor-proof, and this is really that piece that brings the taxes, the safety, and compliance all together for California's 17 new license types. One of the things that's nice about these new laws, even though they just recently extended the emergency regulations for California, is that once the market changes, and we call it like the grown-up period really comes, for the adult use cannabis license process, probably 90% of current operators in the state will not have compliant product. I mean, even until the end of the month, all products after the end of the month, this month, have to be destroyed that are not tested under this new system, which none of them have been tested other than for just purely potency. So we're really honored to be able to have the opportunity to have this distribution company. And as you can see, a lot of the same organizational managers and owners, however, from the vice president of operations down, very highly skilled people here locally, trained from our external experts that will be helping to oversee this distribution company. And the kind of the fun one. In December of last year was the first time in the history of legalized cannabis. It's that big of a fact. First time ever, more products were sold than flower. I own one of the data companies in the space. And when you're thinking about $7 to $14 billion of sales, and everyone used to think cannabis was just smoking, marijuana cigarettes, and now transdermal patches, sublingual strips, even to the point I own companies that work with suppositories and food-grade pharmaceutical suppositories. Even in California, if there's a product, they'll make it for it. So we're seeing that more and more with consumer experiences and use and standardization of products, that there's a very big need for good manufacturing companies because more people are going to be exposed to these products every day. Josh, I'm sure you saw Colorado, some of the first companies they marketed and became big brands, but they didn't have quality assurance. They didn't have continuity or experts running their processing facilities. That's when we started to see pesticide recalls and product violations from 40,000 lollipops having to be recalled. How do you track 40,000 lollipops? Well, within about 30 seconds in our system, we would know everywhere they were sold, how to actually get them back and start our recall procedure. So manufacturing is something that we realize. You've got local real estate experts that have worked here for years, restaurant experience, some of the largest legal cannabis experience in the world at this table. This is a piece that we have other experts. We wish our whole team could have been here, but some of our best extraction partners, you've got 60 years of extraction wisdom and expertise. Cannabis extractors, they work specifically in extraction technologies. Mixed hydrocarbon, ethanol, volatile, non-volatile, CO2, lipid-based. They design processes and systems for completely ISO-certified GMP laboratories. As we talk about this building here shortly, we have an old it was currently operating, but an FDA food-grade lab. I never in my life have found a lab that was so perfect for a manufacturing facility in the heart of where they grow the best and some of the most tomatoes in the world for making our salsas and products. So with this manufacturing company, we know that we're able to do volatile extraction here. I think that there's been a lot of problems with that in the industry, even though it's a very good solvent. So we're going to design our entire facility to be able to handle volatile or non-volatile, even if in the beginning we're doing more non-volatile methodologies. Exhibis, like I mentioned, this partner with Josh's sales and their sales. You're talking about some of the most legal sales here in the United States based on some of these companies' experience. And as you can see, every single point when a product comes in for manufacturing, all of our quality assurance points have to be followed. This isn't just easy bake ovens and making pop brownies like everyone used to think. One of the worst things we saw in Colorado with a client years ago, they were getting botulism results in products. And you're like, how does this happen? It's Colorado, a little cold sometimes in the winter, negative 20 degrees. They didn't order enough packaging. FedEx truck comes, they unload it, they have all of these brownies literally ready to package. They didn't allow their packaging to get to food, like to room temperature. So putting it in a cold package, sealing that, condensation, botulism, salmonella, you could have very dangerous diseases essentially happen. So we know that this can happen. That's why quality assurance, compliance, the safety for our workers are paramount, especially in this aspect of the facility. As you can see, many of the products that we can make, we can either white label for our own companies or for other companies, but if there's a product, we'll make it as long as it's done safely. And in this stage, many of the operators currently are not producing safely, so we want to create a new viable option for California here, and specifically in Santa Barbara. With this organizational chart as well, you notice with our Vice President of Operations, Manufacturing Operations, and the Assistant Manager, these gentlemen have overseen multiple extraction operations in many, many states and California as well. So it's an honor to bring their experience to this team as well. Would you gentlemen care to go over the facility a little bit more here?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Nick. So our facility is at 819 Reddick Street. The building is about 9,600 square feet. We used local engineer Ken Dixon with Windward Engineering to help us go through and demise the space. How we decided to do it was in downstairs we were going to have it demised into 3 spaces, delivery, distribution, and manufacturing. Upstairs we're going to have our corporate offices. We chose this space out of other choices because of the parking, because of the location, the M1 zoning, and those are the reasons that we did choose this space. Also, of course, as Nick said, with that lab was a huge bonus. So here's just some pictures. That's the lab. The company was a Peel that used to be in there. They just moved to a larger location in Goleta, but it's top of the line lab that's already currently in there.
One piece with the building that we've looked into is with the 3 businesses downstairs, their own ingress, egress. When you already have a food grade FDA approved level, sadly this is still federally illegal, but when we follow state rights, but with this lab, it's already certified to like FDA standards. So just like with our international experience we bring to the table, it's already at a higher safety standard than we need to be operating. So we try to set that bar higher than we're even required. I know being a good neighbor is really important. I'm thankful that many of the facility neighbors are here. These businesses, we scale them via shift, not via square footage and size. So having 24/7 on-site security and these sorts of operations, typically we'll have shift 1 do pre-processing and processing. The second shift then dealing with distillation, formulation, third shift packaging, compliance, and preparing for the next day. This is a sort of facility that could and would have people there 24/7. So you're not going to have a shift of 40 employees show up and just take all the on-street parking. Also being able to park our own vehicles on site for distribution and delivery and not have to be a burden locally for traffic patterns is something that's really at the forefront of our thought processes with this building. If in the future, if with planning review, if this is to be approved, we are definitely open to interpretation on how to do this better for the neighbors, for line of sight, potentially different sorts of like loading bay if needed. But we tried to be ADA compliant for our complete first floor and the most functional facility based on ISO standards and good manufacturing practices. And the second floor, there's its own exit. There's for upstairs and downstairs, there's 2 ways in and 2 ways out. So if our corporate offices were to be upstairs there, it's completely separate business and address. Josh, would you care to cover anything from security from some of your experience here? I know we've got ETG systems and a very robust security plan that's open and that the council has, but anything on security additionally?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you. So security obviously is the most paramount thing in this industry from day one. From the just things that we've seen happen over the time, and that we've luckily captured them on our cameras, whether it be even something that's happening downtown Denver, and the perpetrator ran across in front of our cameras, which has happened multiple times, and we've been able to catch them. We have at all of our facilities, we have so much cameras, so many cameras and so many security devices and capturing methods, and this facility is going to be probably even more protected than anything that we have built in Colorado, because we've learned from all the places where we left loopholes, of course. So what we have done here, I can't actually see that far. My eyes are not that good, but the facility basically is surrounded 100% with cameras inside and outside. Anywhere that there's any sort of an area where there's limited access, where there could be product, there could be anything that has cannabis in it, is going to be, here we go. Well, I guess it's just, we have cameras and motion detectors and glass breaks on every single piece of the building. So there's never, if anyone is trying to get in any which way possible, we're going to know that it's going to happen. And everything's kept on site, on storage for, I don't know how many days we do it here, but.
I mean, the digital is usually 4 years.
It is 4 years here. Well, so that's a lot more than we even do in Colorado, so that's great. I thought that we were in Colorado standards, but I guess everything's kind of going above and beyond in California.
And Ben, were there any codes or other pieces that you wanted to mention? I know that your team had really focused on that.
Yeah, and just to correct you, according to the California laws, I believe it's 7 years actually that the video recordings have to be kept on file. So just for correction, I mean, we're going to be following every single California state code as well as Santa Barbara municipal code. I mean, when it comes to every aspect of the business, I mean, video surveillance according to 5044 from California state code for every one of the three businesses to the specific operational requirements for manufacturing, for distribution and delivery. Everything will be to code and exceed it thereof.
Well, I know kind of in summation here, like I said, when I lend my name and reputation for our company that we've built for years to a group of individuals to partner with them, it's only because they're rooted in their community. They have the experience for business relationships to actually do this correctly. They have the right amount of capital to run these companies, and they bring in the right experience to do so. In this process over the last 6 months working with this team and getting to know this community and living just about an hour south, we really tried to figure out the best way to be a part of the community, and we want you to want us to be here. This is something to create sustainable and tax revenue and jobs for years to come. But Santa Barbara has the opportunity now to set the standard with these new licenses. We want to do it responsibly with your help, and really are thankful for this opportunity to present today.
These are just a number of the charities that we have contributed to already, and in our, as I said, cannabis and community go hand in hand. We've donated $10,000 to these charities through Coastal, and we are going to continue to donate to these charities throughout hopefully the next 100 years doing business in Santa Barbara.
Yeah, we've dedicated 2% of our net sales net profits to these companies as well. So moving forward, it'll be a continual thing for us to be a large contributor to the society and community.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that portion of the meeting complete, we'll now turn to question and answer. So myself and Teva may have some questions for you on your proposal. The first one I wanted to ask, just in general, and this is more, the manufacturing side is quite a bit more complex than a storefront retail. Things like the manufacturing processes, there's a lot of, some chemicals, some high pressure vessels, some, things like that. I'm wondering if you can just, for all of us here, kind of give us an elementary primer on what is it that you're doing inside the building?
Perfect. Yeah, I'd love to cover that one. I like to break it down. My background's in biology, international relations, and speak a lot of languages for the military. I never thought I'd be talking about good manufacturing practices. I know cannabis has some stigma, so I usually like to kind of break it down. Let's just think about coffee, for example, like pretty familiar. Our distribution company is going to be picking up coffee beans from various coffee farmers, tracking and logging those into a vault that's done to the best conditions for maintaining coffee, like freshness, safety, and from thieves trying to steal the coffee beans. Once that's cleared for testing, that would then be sold to our manufacturing company. The coffee beans are received, tracked, logged, inventoried, and inspected. There's 17 different points of inspection that they go through. If they don't meet that, we instantly stop, contact the distribution company, which then can contact the actual source. Depending on how we're going to make coffee, I mean, we've got French press, we've got coarse grade, we've got like espresso grade, different ways to roast it for certain sorts of expressions from different cultivars, like different coffee types from different places. There's a lot of different products. People like their coffee differently, so we don't like to just say you're going to have it like Folgers wants you to. We like to provide those options. Those coffee beans then are going to be roasted or ground, like in cannabis, like extracted oils to actually get the base distillate oils, be that from, let's say, ethanol extraction or from a lipid-based extraction or a CO2-based extraction. You're going to have then like this coffee sludge or solution, like just like water. Water is a solvent used to break down the beans and extract what we actually want from the coffee. From that coffee sludge or that distillate, like the raw oil from these cannabis plants or from the coffee, we could then make certain sorts of canned beverages and coffees. We could put that into a very concentrated form that's used just for a specific sort of inhalation methodology, or added to nebulizers or vaporizer cartridges for like quick electronic cigarette style. But following all the FDA warnings, we wouldn't be adding things to our coffee. We're not allowed to. Flavor enhancers or glycol, PG glycol, very common viscous solution used to make it pyrolyze or burn. Those are the things that we follow, still food grade standards from the FDA, even though the FDA can't tell us how to do those. Once then we're putting that into specific edibles or canned sorts of coffees or topical lotions and creams, for example, those coffee beans have to be dealt with. And that's something that in Colorado I learned not from a client, but from the news. There was a dispensary that had expired products and they threw them in a dumpster. And then some high school kids got in that dumpster, took those products to a high school and gave them to some of their friends and teachers without knowing that they had cannabis oil in them. So that's when we started to learn in Colorado, hey, we need to destroy all waste product. I've seen at manufacturing facilities, employees that are handling the cannabis, the raw plant material in pre-processing, and then taking their gloves, throwing those away, and then going in the trash and getting those gloves out, putting them in the freezer and putting them inside out and making piles of like keef or like from the oils on the gloves. If it can happen, we've seen it. And that's why our security is so robust to protect those coffee grounds. So before those are put in a dumpster, which would be a locked and enclosed facility here at the facility, we're actually making those unrecognizable, grinding those, mixing 50% or 51% waste material, kitty litter, soil, and making those unrecognizable, bagging those, weighing those, tracking those, logging those coffee grounds, and then putting those in the right waste stream, which we've already contacted some local suppliers for that purpose. But really, it's just like tomatoes. You could make lots of types of salsa, ketchups, dried tomatoes. With a variety of different methodologies, it's just like food grade processing and handling. So we really focus with extraction on those oils of the plant from unpollinated female flowers, which could be fresh plant material or dry plant material. By being able to do both, like you wouldn't want to take sun-dried tomatoes and then turn those into salsa. You would want to use the freshest tomatoes to do that. The same with some of the local cannabis here. Hope that answered your question there.
Great analogy. We didn't practice that one. That's great.
And in the afternoon, when you keep talking about coffee, broccoli or something next time.
Oh, goodness.
I'm just kidding. Air quality, both internal and external. I was wondering if you could talk a bit, the internal air quality from the employee safety and handling side, external air quality from an odor perspective, since many of the neighborhood are here.
Yeah, very, very good question. Just like our cultivation facilities, it costs more to control odor. I mean, when you have a skunk farm, you have to put in very strict positive pressure, carbon filtration, ozone generation, vapor barriers. I mean, there's a good amount. When it comes to extraction, we like to insulate things to areas. So the whole facility doesn't have to be Class 1, Div 1 explosion proof. Like some of the outlets we use are $417 outlets that won't have a spark come from them. Anything in that could cause a spark. We've seen New Mexico, a company, massive explosion from butane because they didn't have spark proof and the kid's crock made a spark on a little sponge mat. 2 people, 99% of their bodies burned. So they had their entire facility that was open to this gas. Anywhere that there can be volatile gases or gases for how they're stored has to be done correctly in flammable storage in a separate area, in a separate room. All of the tubing and piping for that also has to be compliant to that level. The rooms where actually extraction could happen, CO2, people mostly, they're like, it's not volatile. You don't have to worry about that. Well, there are pressures, and I have seen companies cut corners on the fittings and couplings used or not replacing the consumable materials every 3 months, replacing certain O-rings and gaskets, and having a hose come off and hit somebody and take out an eye, break a jaw. So even though it's not volatile, CO2 we still treat as something that is dangerous and needs to be handled according to all those standards. One of the nice things with various certifications, ISO, and a few others, we can't even start our processes, even though these aren't mandated locally. We won't even start our processes until we maintain those and achieve those certifications to know that it is safe. For the actual, let's say, from the ventilation for where extraction's happening, and during the site visit this next week, we'll have some of our extraction experts and engineers there to answer some of the more detailed questions for you. But we use certain sorts of scrubbers that are reclaiming any ethanol, usually 96% of that, to be able to be reused, as well as those gases with vacuum purge ovens, being able to actually control those gases and not just exhausting those. There are some very expensive air scrubbers that are complex to discuss that essentially make sure that through the proper use, proper fittings, proper equipment, that those gases aren't being released. Anything in the facility, I mean, there's carbon filtration that would be done where lots of air exchanges are happening there. And then outside, there's additional filtration as well, typically on the vapor side with those scrubbers, with carbon filtration. And with this downtown area, you wouldn't need something additionally like ozone.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned recalls, and I'm wondering if you do have a test that comes back too high for organophosphates or pesticides or something. What is your process for the recall?
Something that's really unique. I've seen this happen in Colorado once. There was a company making products for lots of companies. The most important thing for us is testing our raw plant material, never allowing anything that's not compliant, unsafe, or not tested before it even comes into our facility. So if some coffee beans that we buy had pesticides on them, like something that's a banned pesticide, we would know it during the quarantine stage before it ever comes into the kitchen. Because as soon as it comes into the kitchen, it can contaminate all the different places, your instruments, your processes, your Urban Meyer flasks, everything. Even your packaging. I've seen certain pesticides in packaging equipment that made it all the way through the chain of custody to that point. So that's one way that we really nip that in the bud right away. If there were to be something that happened later on, let's say it is from a pesticide violation or a residual solvent, a heavy metal, some sort of potency issue. Everything we do is food grade, food safe. So even though we don't have to, we know this is all for ingestion in one way or another, even though it might be a different methodology. If there is a recall, let's say in a batch, first, root cause analysis. Some of our project managers come from Kanban sorts of methodologies of if we put in more bathrooms, we can make this more efficient. But usually if you have a recall, that's a symptom to something that happened either in your manufacturing or in how it was produced. We want to get to the root as quickly as possible. If any of those products have actually been released for sale, and this comes out from a point-of-sale test later, that's when through our API, through metrics, and we usually, knowing that metrics in some of these can break, we like to be redundant. Maybe it's my military background, but if you have a single point of failure for something, it will nip you here. So with both of those APIs, we can then see which products were made from a batch of distillate, which cultivators those came from, which stores the delivery company delivered to, the distribution company distributed to, and which products had actually been sold from the point of sale of those dispensaries, or those distributors. It's pretty complex, but within that, it's about batch IDs, transportation manifests, and keeping the most rigorous compliance records possible. Like I said, for this point, we are a compliance company that is given the opportunity to do this, but the responsibility of tracking is what we really keep at the heart of our business model.
Nice segue. Let's talk tracking. Could you talk a bit, and part of it is on tracking and manifest, but what what sort of system are you using to integrate into the statewide metric system? Also, could you just dovetail onto your anti-diversion plan, or diversion, I think, is a mass balance equation from receipt to manufacturing to waste. Can you talk about how you're tracking those three components? And I just lost my train of thought. I need coffee. And also, well, start and I'll follow up if I remember.
Let's see if I just to show you kind of one example here. The quality assurance, quality control. Sorry, just to go in reverse here. This is something that we plan out in every one of our operations. When you think even like from quality assurance directors, like the logistics coordinator, like compliance control, for these products, there's more scanning than you would believe. And Josh, I'm sure you remember back in the day when people would use that blue masking tape for painting and like label all their clones and label their batches with those sorts of, that can rub off. Or I remember the whiteboards back in the day. It's like this, here are the test results for this, and someone bumps it. I never thought I would be pushing for such a digitalized system now, but with the QR codes that we use and the state-required RFID tracking badges, it's very easy for every single batch to have that. So whenever coffee beans come to the facility, every single batch is scanned and entered into our database. What's nice then is we also have RFID tracking. This is similar to like hospital mentality, where each worker on their badge, they have an RFID. Like we know where they are in the facility. Each product type has an RFID. And if there's ever things that are not in the right zone where they shouldn't be or don't have access, there'll be a security alert, and then instantly our 24/7 security team, they're there for that sort of reason. Every step that it's moved, either from cultivation from one room to another, or from this vault to a point of sale system to the manufacturing company, those are all tracked and logged. Metric is a very interesting tool to use. It's one of the better that we've had and required from the state. There are additional, seed to sale tracking companies, most people talk about that, like blockchain, like it's something new. But this is something like, as a kid, I remember semen to cellophane, like with cattle. It's like, when you're buying steaks, like which cows those were made from. So we're not reinventing the wheel here, but we are having to adapt what we know from other states, our other California operations, to the Santa Barbara code, as well as the California codes that we'll have to be compliant with later this year. Josh, from some of your experience, do you want to mention something when with Metric and maybe a time that it went down and then how you had to deal with that? Because it can happen.
Yeah, certainly. Unfortunately, Metric does go down, and more importantly, the POS goes down. And especially coming over the last 9 years, the cloud-based servers weren't nearly as robust as they should have been and have been. And with a major company that we went through this with was MJ Freeway earlier last year, I believe, and we're quite a large client of theirs. And it was down for 3 days. In 3 days without any sort of tracking whatsoever. So we had to do everything by hand for 3 days straight. And then it took about a month to come back through and make sure to relog everything in, because the state still required you to every night have all of your sales inputs. They require you to have everything inputted by midnight every single night for that day. So everything was done by hand, and it showed us what it means to have a system that works. So what we can take from that now is we have Weave, who we were working with, and it's going to be our POS system, but it's also going to be our tracking system on the back end. They have redundancies that they will not go down, and they're working with Amazon as their hub, their backbone is. So I don't think I've ever gone on Amazon Prime and it didn't work. So we're pretty what we've learned and how we've seen it happen, that it causes so much frustration, and there's so many compliance issues that could have happened along the way there. And these weren't things that were pushed on us by Colorado, but we had to figure out how to make it work. And there were certainly products that it took a while. It took a long time to figure out where they went and how, because everything was done by paper. So having these redundancies that we're going to have with Weave in this system is going to be an amazing leap forward for us. We know that we don't have to deal with anything like we did, because there potentially could have been issues that we had that we still are trying to work out. And that was 1.5 years ago. But compliance and just making sure every product is there is always just so paramount to what we're going to do here.
Too often in the industry, you see like this is a startup industry full of startup companies, and even though some of us have been around for almost a decade in this legal space, there still are those instances where things can happen. Businesses will make poor business choices by trying to get products to market. They didn't raise enough capital, and they have like cash flow problems. So they'll try to sell products too quickly. That R&D process, it takes time. It takes science, and it takes multiple labs to test it. We're not the sort of company that just as soon as we have our first products ready, they go out the door. Usually we have a hold of 1 month to 2 months where we continue to test those with other labs, continue to do more and more trials with those to make sure that there are not problems that would come up later in the process to, let's say, the lab that we're using didn't calibrate a high-pressure liquid chromatography instrument correctly, passed some of our product that potentially had something that was wrong with it or some adulteration. We then sell that thinking that's fine, but then later at point of sale, like in a dispensary, someone samples it, tests it, realizes there's a problem. We can't afford that from a brand standpoint or from the possibility of inflicting harm to one of our customers. So we take more time to make sure that those things are correct and are standardized, that it's repeatable every single time, more scientific method process other than just make products, sell products, make money, repeat. And if we don't have quality products, they won't ever go out of our doors.
And I remember my second question. There's one thing to track all the different pieces. How often are you reconciling your records to make sure that your inputs are correct?
So that's daily.
Yeah, according to I believe it was, let's see, the state regulations, it's 5424. It's the requirement is once every 14 days, but I mean we'll be doing it daily.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was aware of the 2 weeks, but you're doing it on a daily basis. And what does that entail?
So essentially what did come into the facility, it's almost like inventory checks where in our dispensaries, for example, we have like our day vault and then we have our main vault. We will have dry storage, we will have wet plant storage, and you have, just like in a commercial kitchen, like is the refrigerator at 34.3 degrees Fahrenheit? Was the bathroom clean like every hour? Those sorts of standards we also have to follow based on being food grade. So going a little above and beyond the requirement for reconciliation, that's how we know if, for example, if there's a 5-gram diversion, it's our responsibility to report that. So the second that happens, like we want to find out where that went, who took that, where could this have possibly happened. We know most theft from all of our operations has been from internal. So that's why in our manufacturing facility, doing everything food grade, having uniforms, it's not allowing people to have their bags, their cell phones back in those facilities. And even like something like this, not allowed even in a spark-proof room. Because like this could create a spark and explode the whole facility. So we're very, very strict when it comes to the compliance piece.
Androids.
Yeah.
Turning the corner now to the mobile side away from the building. Can you remind me again from the commercial fleet versus the retail delivery? What's the size? How many vehicles do you have?
Typically, for delivery in California, you want to be able to scale that pretty quickly. We'll usually start with 3 delivery vehicles. Our fleet vehicles typically 2, and then we might end up leasing a 3rd, depending on. California is kind of enormous when it comes to a state, and you've got. Yes, sir. Sorry about that. It's a very, very large state. So, like, if we're picking up with our distribution company products in the north all the way down to San Diego, you're talking about needing multiple cars. Some of our APIs that we have for distribution now allow you to actually pick up more orders in a certain region, so you don't have to be making so many trips. As this facility, we really want to source as much raw plant material from Santa Barbara licensed farmers as possible. It's kind of like keeping this coastal, but kind of within the county. There are some great cultivators and manufacturers around the state, though, but usually 3 on a delivery standpoint, you have a pretty high population, a few colleges here, but not being able to deliver to certain areas is going to limit the potential delivery clients. We can't just deliver down at the corner. It has to be to a residence. We have to be able to scan and check their IDs. We have to maintain that compliance from how we load our delivery vehicles to where they actually go and make the point of sale and then return. Equally with distribution, that cash, like this is a cashless facility. We're not making a single sale here this is not a B2C. This is purely a B2B hub, so you'll never see people coming here and trying to buy anything. We'll never bring cash back to this facility and use a vault for that. That would always go to a night drop or to a deposit.
So are you using the same kind of vehicle for commercial deliveries as you are for retail?
Not typically. We try. The environmental aspect is a big component there.
So how many, I'm still back to how many vehicles do you have by
3
commercial line and by retail line?
Commercial, typically 2 vehicles, leasing a third, and then typically starting with 3 delivery vehicles
Okay.
for the retail standpoint.
And for the benefit of the neighborhood folks here, all parked on your private property?
All on our private property. I know that on one side of the building there's those 5 spots for employee parking, and then there's 17.
There's 16 spots on the
16 on the other spot. So 5 of those essentially we'll always park our private commercial vehicles there. And if we increase our fleet, would use those spaces or lease out an additional lot. I know that the gentlemen here have some real estate here in Santa Barbara they could use for
Okay,
that.
but no on-street.
No on-street parking, no, sir.
Okay. On a segue into security a little bit, I want to take security from both the structure itself, and you talked about access control and some alarms, but also vehicle security. So when when you are receiving inventory product, so when you have delivery vehicles coming in, when you're loading your own, either from the retail side or the commercial side, can you talk a bit about that aspect of security and how you're mitigating any concerns?
So our commercial fleet, essentially the distribution company, that's not going to be making multiple trips. That's usually 1-2 trips a day. The delivery vehicles, depending on demand, could be coming back to the facility more. And when we can have orders go in like one fleet, like 2 orders, 3 orders at a time to a certain region, that's going to reduce the amount of trips. When there's a large delivery for distribution, that's when typically we'll alter that pattern. We'll usually alert local authorities when there's a large distribution coming in, a delivery from that company, or if there's a lot of products going out. When I mentioned those RFIDs before, each employee is issued a cell phone. There's also RFIDs and tracking in the vehicle, and also those products, each essentially delivery SKU that might have, let's say, a vaporizer cartridge, 2 grams of 1 flower, and 4 transdermal patches. That's going into an exit package that also has an RFID. So we know that package, batch 1-2-4, is with this delivery vehicle, with this delivery employee that was logged out of the facility at 11:17 p.m., entered into the vehicle. We can track then the products, track the driver, and track the vehicle to the point of sale. If it goes somewhere it's not supposed to, instantly an alert. It has to follow its predetermined routes. When that sale then happens, that person typically is going to alert their customer, just like an Uber, hey, I'm outside. Or it's like, at their address, they'll then come up to the facility. First thing is checking the ID. Once the ID is checked and payment's then done, that's when the product transfer would happen. That RFID then is scanned, just like you would sign for something, so we know that went to the person who was 21, that we scan their ID as well, and then returning to the vehicle. Let's say there's something that the client didn't want. Maybe there was the wrong item, or they see it and then they decide not to have it. We do have a process then to scan that back in, maintaining that original RFID to then track that back to the facility.
And for load in and load out, are you using any security, accompanying drivers as they load in or load out vehicles, or as you're receiving deliveries?
Every single time. So 2 typically for distribution. We have whoever's the manager, like duty roster there, as well as then the security director at the time, because we will have someone at this facility 24/7, also making the neighborhood a little bit more secure with some of the cameras in the area. I think that's definitely going to be a help. Whenever there's a distribution coming in of large plant material or a lot of volume of products going out, that's when 2 will actually come out. That's all done under camera and making sure that it's the right time for that. When it's delivery, there's then 1 that comes out with that every single time, 1 watching from inside the facility on the security cameras, 1 physically present with the driver to load that.
And I would imagine that's twofold, 1 for security and 1 for diversion, anti-diversion as
Absolutely.
well, right? So you'll have 24/7 on-site security.
Yes, sir.
At this facility.
Not
Okay.
just 24/7 security monitoring, but actually a physical
Right, a
person
physical
there
presence.
24/7.
Okay. Either retail transport or commercial transport, let's say that you have a mechanical failure, right? Anything from a blown tire to, radiator goes out or something.
Or a 3-foot snowstorm in Colorado and someone getting stuck on Monarch Pass.
handle that?
Well, the nice thing is with some of these technologies, we know if there's a problem beforehand. Like, why is a vehicle stopped when it's not supposed to? It's authorized to pick up fuel here, be at this point. Whenever it deviates from that more than a certain standard deviation, it alerts in the system. ETG Security Monitoring, they are a great 24/7 monitoring company for us. Also will employ more local security companies if need be, as well as our own in-house security team. When that happens, we usually know that that happens before. In Santa Barbara, you have different conditions. If it snows 3 feet here, I think we've got larger problems than this. But if, let's say, we get a flat tire going onto the 101, coming back from, let's say, near Goleta or somewhere of that nature, what we're going to do is if we have the ability to send someone else to pick up the staff and pick up the products, we'll do that right away. We'll also alert the authorities. That's our first step. Like, we do have a vehicle stopped. Following the same, all of our processes and protocols and procedures all come from high-value asset protection items. Jewelry, cash, brinks. You never thought we'd be looking at how they transfer and then how we're transferring cannabis products, but use best practices. As soon as the product is then picked up, logged, staff safety is the first priority. If there is the need to, like, we'll send whoever's most readily available for that, but first line of defense would be the police, just to let them know we have an issue and what that size of that issue could be so that they bring the appropriate force or protection. Those are then going to come back to the facility to be logged back in. We have seen this in the past where diversion happened based on this happening. It's like, oh, these 12 products disappeared. We don't really know what happened. As soon as those are picked up, they're logged, tracked back to the facility, relogged. Even if our delivery is not 30 minutes, or less, like, it's not going to be free, we'll explain this to the customer and then resend that delivery.
I just had one last question on manufacturing. Is there any technique or process that you are looking to implement here in Santa Barbara that you have not done in any of your other locations?
No, sir. Luckily, I think with some of our experience here, we've done and seen almost every methodology, from people trying to squish cannabis flowers with hair curling irons to 1,000-liter instruments in India that are doing the largest CO2 manufacturing and extraction in the world for, like, Whole Foods sorts of, like, turmeric and cayenne pepper and capsaicins. There are a few methodologies we really like. The industry kind of has an ego, as you may or may not have seen. It's like, our method is the best. We are more of, this is agriculture, this is manufacturing, this is retail. So we like to pull best practices from those. You have to use the right tool for the job. So CO2 is great for certain aspects, but not for all product types. Mixed hydrocarbons, great for certain things, but not for all product types. The same with lipid-based. How the body absorbs these products is determined by oftentimes their solvents and their methodology. I've even done dimethyl ether extractions in Czech Republic and different places in Europe and found amazing results that people aren't even practically doing in the United States. But if it's not safe, if we haven't done it before, it's not our intention to do that and learn here.
Okay, so everything you're bringing in is you have lots of experience doing elsewhere.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, those are all the questions I had, Ms. Ostringer.
Talking about experience, so Nick and Josh, you seem to have a lot of experience in your industries. How hands-on are you going to be here in Santa Barbara, since you're Denver-based or Colorado-based?
Josh, you want to go first?
So I've kind of committed to these guys. I'm going to help them get everything going in the right direction and use all my experience and to make sure that everything's set up the way that it should be. And I'll be in and out it's an hour and a 45-minute flight. So I've been here in and out 3 times in the last week already. I have no problem coming, and I'll be here as much as I need to. But the most important thing is I'll be here as long as it takes to make sure that we're using the exact practices and the best practices that I've learned and created back home and been part of creating, and be able to help these guys, because the only way that we can all be successful is if the facility's successful, the company's successful, and then makes Santa Barbara cannabis successful, which is, I think, really important.
And I myself, I'm here just an hour and a half south, depending on the traffic down near Los Angeles. Good amount of staff there. So as an individual, as a partner with Coastal, we also have 3C Consulting, my consulting company, nearly 30 staff located around the United States. But what we typically do is we're a big train-the-trainer mentality. So we do have California staff to come up and help with this. I myself am close. But finding those local residents, training them, and then having the oversight for them is very important. Bringing forward our extraction partners from California or from Colorado as well, it's not just come in and teach somebody chemistry. These people are going to come in designing the additional SOPs for the staff training, but this is definitely one that's in our backyard. And I think when we were naming this company, they knew that I was a surfer, and this is how they would get me here. And Rincon is pretty close, so definitely, if there's more swell, we'll be here a lot more. But looking forward to that.
And then I noted, so you've got 3 business types operating out of one facility. How are those going to integrate or not integrate from a security standpoint and also from an employee standpoint?
They are all individual corporations. So just, Citizens United, take it for the good, bad, or the ugly. Essentially, they are individual operating entities. They have their own security office, their own security directors, their own security vaults, their own storage vaults, their own restrooms. Even knowing legally that there are some companies that have put forth plans that have all these things under one roof, but they're not compliant with how the state's mandating that they be compliant later. So sometimes, like, some of the local codes didn't get into that level of detail, but the separate ingress-egress is very, very important. Our delivery can operate independently from distribution and from manufacturing. We won't just be selling the products that we manufacture. We know lots of good companies. I have other companies in California that make products that we won't make here. So that we'll, let's say lip balms or infused products that we'll buy from those other companies. Manufacturing equally, we'll have our products go back out through distribution and out through delivery, but we'll also be having other products. And even with some of the local cultivators, they may want to maintain their own unique perspective and brands and products. So if we're extracting for them, as our distribution company would pick up their plant material, take it to our manufacturing facility, after it's been quarantined, of course, processed into potentially bulk oils or white label packaged back to them so that they can then, from their facility or from their dispensary, sell their own products.
And from the employee standpoint, or say, can a delivery driver access the manufacturing side? What's the security process to keep those separate?
Yeah, actually, I could just maybe show one more layout here. Sorry for the fast. Actually, we'll go to this side. Just to refresh everyone's memory. Here we go. So as you can see, there's a delivery side that has its own entrance. There's a distribution side, and then also the manufacturing side. So if you're not an employee of the manufacturing company, you couldn't even scan in. And each one has its own vestibule, its own office, restroom, and vault. It's a really big benefit when you actually own your means of production or the supply chain. The biggest areas I've seen for diversion, for theft, compliance issues have been from the transfer from manufacturing, the transfer to distribution, or from the transfer from distribution to delivery. When it's independent but in the same area, which is licensed and allowed from California, we're minimizing more security breaches, more areas where that could happen. So whenever there's, let's say, a product from distribution that's cleared, by going out of Unit C in that secure access area in the middle there, that can then be scanned, logged, and then logged into Unit B, for example. When products are then done and ready for distribution, being able to be labeled, compliant, scanned, then into the distribution company in that centralized, secure area.
Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Those are all the questions we had. So at this time, I'm going to open up to public comment. For those of you who have not turned a speaker slip in yet, please, thank you. Do exactly what this gentleman did and bring a speaker slip up to me. You'll have 2 minutes. The first speaker will be John Fragosa. Is that Fragosa, followed by Martha Fragosa.
I'm a native of Santa Barbara, and I live less than 200 feet from your facility. Is this mic on? Push the button. Hey, testing 1, 2. All right. As far as I'm concerned, your facility is hermetically sealed, unless you choose otherwise. You're not my problem. The impact on the community appears with the drivers. Who are these guys? Are they independent contractors? And if they're independent contractors, then you need to see if they need to be a separate permit to operate as an operator, because they're carrying that product and they're not employees of this company. If they're employees of the company, then my concern is you're opening up in gangbanger territory, and these guys don't like you because you're their competition. And eventually the gangbangers are going to do something stupid. Okay, this is a big problem because are your drivers going to be armed? Are they going to carry weapons? Any one of you can answer. No answer? You don't know.
Sir,
I don't want a turf war, and I don't want a bullet going through my living room. Okay, this is a big problem because we have these idiots, MS-13 and wannabes, the whole mess. They're going to get involved with you people, and so that's my concern, and that's why I'm here. How are you going to handle this, the city and the people? Because I have no problem with your facility. I voted for the initiative. 80% of my friends smoke pot. I don't, but I don't want to see them get busted. So that's my concern is how are you going to protect the community? Because you and the gangbangers, that's a new problem. Thank you.
thank you. Martha Fregoso?
I'm not as loud as my brother. I also live at 823 East Haley Street. My house faces directly the entrance of your parking lot. I already have Jack in the Box, which is open 24/7, literally right next door to me. My bedroom is right in the front. You're telling me you're going to be open 24/7. Haley Street is a very busy street, day and night. So I'm concerned about the traffic that you're going to be pulling into that driveway day and night. And you're glad there's no on-street parking because there is no on-street parking. We've taken it all. We're in a high-density AUD area, which I know there are a lot of new buildings coming, so I'm concerned about traffic. There's a lot of homelessness in this area. Homelesses have addictions and they have mental issues. They don't care that you guys have guards. They're going to try and go. They see drugs, they're going to go for it. It's not unusual for me to call 911 once or twice a week because there's a homeless passed out. They're fighting. They're living in the dumpster behind on the property. I see it all because I've lived there almost 40 years. So I'm really concerned about. I commend you for the standards that you're, setting your company with. I think that's great. I don't know necessarily if this building location is the greatest. And Appeal last year, their lab exploded, and they shut down the whole neighborhood until that got fixed. So I'm concerned about that. And I don't want to smell any skunk smell in my neighborhood. I already got French fries next door. Skunk's not going to mix very well.
Okay, Sean Zumwalt, followed by Glenn Serbin, followed by Robert Ludwig.
Hi, guys. Thank you for the presentation. My name is Sean Zumwalt. I've worked actually in that building as well as the next building next door for almost 11 years now. I'm the site manager for the Thermo Fisher Scientific manufacturing facility that's right there. We make capital equipment. So I'm kind of familiar with some of the standards that you've spoken of. My concerns are actually largely covered by theirs. We have a very large vagrant population. One of my responsibilities is to chase off some of the vagrants that decide that take up residence. We have customers coming in and out of our building. We make multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment that are quite sensitive to environmental shocks and other things like that. So my concerns really are about, one, what's your anticipated treatment or handling of the vagrant situation? Two, traffic through that area. We do have a shared parking lot area. Three, how we're going to manage the shared parking lot because cars do move in like locusts whenever there's an open spot available, and sometimes that'll drastically impact shipping of equipment and product. Third thing I'm concerned with is remodeling of this building. We're just finishing up a remodeling project at our facility, and I know how intensive that can be, how much of an impact in the community it can be, and ours was pretty small. So I'd look to you. I know this isn't quite the venue to discuss some of that stuff, but what's the timeline for those for the remodeling project, and what's your anticipated dealing with traffic and vagrants? Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn Serbin.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Glenn Serbin. I'm the president of Serbin Communications, which is right next door to the building. I own the building next door at 813 Reddick, and I own the parking lot that's between our two buildings. The property at 819 Reddick has an easement to go in and out. I found it interesting that nobody's ever approached me to talk about security on the parking lot because that would have to get approved by me. And there's never been a conversation that, who was moving in there. So that's one point that I found interesting, that due diligence hasn't been conducted yet. The building was built as an office building probably 30 years ago. I don't think it's the right building for manufacturing. It was built by Yardi. We're in the same type of building. There was a very big explosion there about a year ago from the company that was doing manufacturing in there. That was not the right facility. They ended up moving to Goleta. And I have nothing against cannabis manufacturing. I voted for legalizing it, but I was under the understanding that it would be at least 1,000 feet from a school or a daycare center. And there's a daycare center right across the street from that building. And it's at 818 Reddick Street. And the other point I want to bring up is that even though this building is on Reddick Street, the other side is Coda Street. Coda Street is the same street that Santa Barbara Junior High is on. It's about 2 blocks away. And at 2:30 and 3 o'clock, they are literally hundreds of students are walking back home right across from this building and then going down Milpa Street on the other side of the building. So you've got a situation where you're blocks away from a high school, you're on the pathway where these students are coming and going, and you have a daycare center right across the street. And I feel for all those reasons, this is not an ideal location for this type of manufacturing building. And as far as the gangs that they were bringing up, I'm constantly, having to paint, take away the markings on the walls in our building. You are in the center of a big gang neighborhood. Right around behind my building, there was a lot of SWAT teams that ended up having to raid certain houses in there. So it's a tough neighborhood.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tracy Trotter.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I got to say, a great presentation. You guys did an awesome job. I have been an extractor in this community for 5 years. I was rejected by this team. They won't tell us why. It's kind of like if you had a kid and they got an F, and you go to the principal and say, "What's up?" They've said, "At the end of the school year, we'll let you know." What would you do? How many of you would be at the principal's office? So that's what I have the complaint with, is mainly them. Great presentation, though. I really like it. You guys are on the east side. They're not telling you a story. I live in the east side, and I have 5 SFR residences on the east side. My best friends are Hispanic. If you're not, you're a part of another side of the deal. They're not kidding, okay? If you don't know Danny, Jose, and the rest of the guys, you're a white honky. Congratulations. Thermal Fisher. Here's something kind of funny. My biggest CO2 extractor has 2 chillers that are $15,000 a piece. They're made by Thermal Fisher. Awesome. You make great chillers. Yeah, but it's your company. I think you are in a perfect location. They are more than 600 feet away from the junior high. They are more than 600 feet away from our elementary school. Casey runs that school. She's awesome. My problem is with this group, and I'm picking on you two because the rest of your team is not here. The fire department should be here, and Anthony should be here. So, Anthony, when you look at it, you should have been here last week and this week. This whole thing is a lot of out-of-towners are coming in. And for us that have been here for 5 years and building our businesses, several of us have been rejected. I gave an example last week. You can look at it. Coincidentally, I just won the High Times Cup. I know how to extract. You're not bringing anything new from Colorado. I got it. Okay? So basically, my complaint is with these guys, and unfortunately they're the only two here, the other two are MIA. Basically, the whole application process for this, as far as I'm concerned, goes to one word: debacle.
And Robert Ludwig.
Wow. I have to agree. And I'm not an extractor, but I am a reader of the notice that I got, and I did speak with Anthony at length and Paul Casey at length and others, and I do have an issue with the process. I didn't hear anything today, nor did I see in quick time, and I would like a copy of that. I believe that is now in the public domain. So if we could get a copy of that so that you don't have to take pictures and I don't have to make sketches. I used to own this building, and I sold Glenn his building. Glenn, you don't hold that against me, do you? That was 20-something years ago when you moved off of where you were in the flood zone and moved to a little bit of a different peril zone. I don't know what the additional process is. I really have no comment on the presentation other than, are these permits transferable? Is this LLC, if I'm a member, one of these people up here might have an interest in this LLC, are those shares sellable without any oversight? So, for example, this reminds me a lot of the cellular industry when it was aborning, and you could buy a permit for any community in America, you held it 5 years, and then you could sell it. This smells similar to me, so I have those kinds of questions. Power backup, we're subjected to a really poor power grid here. If you have very sensitive refrigeration needs, do you have a backup power plan? I didn't hear about that, and I don't know where you would locate it. Like Glenn, I know this property very, very well, and I also know that easement he talked about is very important to his building and is not necessary for him to necessarily make it 24/7 for you. Another question I have, how many folk do you actually have per shift? I didn't hear that. I didn't hear how many people will be both on-site employees and then the number of transient drivers. I did not hear that. I heard 21 parking spaces, 5 on Glenn's property, 16 on 819. And by the way, I didn't hear whether you're buying that property or whether you're leasing that property. And those are some of the things that I would love to know about, and I would like to know if they have to go through a land use.
Thank you very much.
Do they go through a land use?
There will be a permitting process.
So there's a land use permit, a conditional use permit. Is that correct?
There is a permitting process for the tenant improvements.
So it's a building permit only, not land use clearance?
I don't know. We'll get into that later.
Okay.
Okay. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none. So I'm going to turn it back to you. And before you start your 5-minute summation, I'm wondering if you can address some of the things we heard in the public comment. If you could talk about the drivers, whether they're contractors, whether they're members of your company, traffic, number of employees. I think those would be the couple things. And then anything else that you heard, you can add into your 5 minutes.
Perfect.
You want me to answer just a couple first? Or?
Yeah, I'll start with just a couple of the last questions, and then you can get into that. But so we are buying the property. We're in escrow on the property, and we've provided proof of funds to close. We should be closing at the 15 days after the approval of the licenses. I definitely hear your concerns, and we're here to address them. We want to be neighborly. We want to be. We didn't come from out of town. A majority of this business lives here in Santa Barbara. We did bring specialists in to help us because, as you know, it's a newer industry, and so we've put the best team together possible. I own 3 apartment buildings on the east side, Mason, on Voluntario. I'm a neighbor there. I understand the neighborhood. I like the neighborhood. We are, with the homelessness and the parking, so we're going through Andy, the owner of the two buildings, he owns both those buildings. We actually might be purchasing your building as well, but we are doing there's actually different parcels. So the parking is divided in half. So you get your half of the parking, we get our half. And then Glenn Serban, we understand, and I had reached out to you earlier, but you were busy. But yeah, I just gotten your number from Andy. But the parking on that side will be for employees. We understood that that's very important and that you control that. And Andy was very upfront with us when we were purchasing this building for a couple things. As one, that he was not going to sell it to us if we did retail. He felt that that wasn't fair since he has stake in both buildings as well as for the neighborhood, because we were thinking of putting a retail location there. So we did not do that to try to conform to the neighborhood. And then we were, for the 5 parking spots on that side would be employee parking during normal business hours. We would not expect anything more from you. And then on our side, we would control, or we're working through the documents right now where the parking split in half. So we would get the 16 spots and you would have your spots, and it's going to be separate APNs. By the time escrow closes, it'll be 2 separate parcels. Right now it's 5 parcels kind of all mixed together, as you know, but it'll be 2 separate parcels. And with the vagrants, what we've proposed is we're going to have 24-hour security. So hopefully we can actually better the neighborhood. Our goal would be to help you, and you don't look like the type of person who wants to chase out somebody who's homeless or vagrants, as you said. Our goal would be to be that backbone for the neighborhood there. Maybe not the entire east side, but at least our block. And so we would have a hotline up that you could call, and you could call us, and then we would take care of calling the police or sending our security guard over there. So we actually hope to help better that little area there. And as far as the zoning, it is M1 zoning. The upstairs of the building is office, and the downstairs is designated manufacturing. We will be doing, the remodel was another question. Sorry, I'm taking a little bit. I'm trying to answer everybody's questions. But the remodel, we do about 20 projects a year in town. We built 6 units over on the east side that just got completed last year. We're very efficient. We have our own crews. We will get in and out of the remodel. A remodel of that size will probably take about 6 months. We will do that during the business hours. We're not going to be there on Sundays. We're not going to be doing anything that we're not supposed to be doing. We understand construction. We understand the permitting process. We have a local engineer, Ken Dixon, who's already vetted the parking and who's vetted the that what we are proposing here is able to be done. He's done a code analysis for us, so we will be doing everything up to code quickly, much quicker than a typical company could, who would have to go out and hire contractors. We are those people.
And the number of employees per shift, I wonder if you could answer that.
Yeah, so depending on the shift in the day, I mean, when you have the extraction manufacturing company, you could be looking at maybe 6 members in a shift. When it comes to distribution during normal business hours, if there are additional, there could be 1 member for that in different shifts. And then for delivery, still trying to determine the specific market size here, you could be looking at up to 5 employees there, where 2 would be actually at the location and then the 3 drivers. That part could scale for more. To just address a few of the other questions, for backup generation for power, very, very important. We like to do a battery backup system, as well as then some facilities will have, when approved, solar arrays for those battery backups, for also a grid tie, as well as a 10 kilowatt typical emergency backup generator. That's only for our security systems, ingress, egress, lighting, anything that would require temperature quality assurance controls. Everyone is an employee in the company. Based on California law, well, if you have any sort of company, almost everyone should be an employee anymore. But for how the state licensing process works, every single employee background checked, essentially part of the system, an approved, badged individual. There was a little doctrine many years ago recently called the Cole Memorandum. It was the original 8 rules that states had to follow in order to break federal law and not get in trouble for medical marijuana. One of those was preventing diversion and not having firearms at the facility. My staff's life is much more important to me than a product or capital or even having a business. So we do not arm our own staff. So that's the Cole memo wouldn't allow that. We also do not do that. Independent third-party security for some cash distribution, when we are using higher volume, definitely they're certified in good distribution practices, as well as they are security companies, so most likely would have firearms, but not our employees itself. With homelessness, dispensaries in Los Angeles, other places, this has been a concern in the past. When you have 24/7 security with license plate cameras, break glass sensors, someone who's there and monitoring, it's actually something that we do to steward to the community, so that's something we have seen reductions in other communities. Yeah, about a 6-month timeline. I know our environmentals are going to take a little more time for some of the Class 1A standards, but this facility is an incredible facility that already was a lab and needs basic tenant improvements versus major FF&E and TI renovations. The day that we hear about this license, our MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, our conditional use permit, we will start on all those processes that are already developed. That should save us a couple months of development time. The traffic patterns for this, I really appreciate everyone's comments today, specifically yours on like bedroom location and French fries. Like knowing that this, we have like the 2 ways to come in, and also with your with the easement that we have for those 5 parking spots. On the bottom side of the facility, that from this view, is where those 5 parking spaces are for just staff parking. Everything else, business operations, would happen on the other side of the facility. And if yours then, if I believe to the correct, would be the looker left towards your house, if there are going to be more delivery things that are after hours, making sure that our staff are only using that other side. It's definitely good to note about. Most of the delivery hours that I've found with our other states that actually have operational delivery companies, most of our deliveries are from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. About 85% of almost all of our sales happen in that window. So I think during that time, like with kids and their traffic patterns, that's when we would maybe have 1 delivery vehicle operating. But it's those other additional hours after school hours that we would be having more sales. There's no signage on this facility that indicates Green Cross, and like people aren't coming to this to make purchases. It's us just to run businesses, so no signage. The odor control systems on these are voluminous and very expensive, but just because it's legal doesn't mean you have to smell it. I'm a firm believer in that, even though I think some of your cultivators off the 101 might want to consider their odor mitigation because it's not,
So I'll, I think you hit my list here. Thank you. I'm going to invite you to follow up outside with any of the other folks here, one-on-one. But thank you. That was helpful to address some of those concerns. So with that, I'm going to let you have 5 more minutes, and you can continue to address public comment, or you can conclude however you'd like.
I'd just like to start by saying thank you and welcoming us to your neighborhood. We really hope that we do achieve all 3 of these licenses. We are local here. Our office is on Curio. We will exchange information with anybody who does want to exchange information. Anything that we can work out that's reasonable, we're willing to do. We're excited to be employers in this community and to be a part of it. We really hope that we put a lot of effort into this. We've spent a lot of time thinking about it. We put a great group together, and we really hope that this, as well as we get the dispensary permit on Chapala, and that we're able to be the next large company in Santa Barbara that pays great wages and does all of those types of things. And I think that from a business standpoint, we thank you for being here.
And we couldn't do this sort of thing. I know it's been I wouldn't necessarily call it a debacle. I've gone through some of the worst ones in the world when it comes to going for 2 licenses in a country, for example. It's quite a hard job, so I do know that we can always learn from the process, but thanking for this opportunity. And also, regards on the license, but if we're fortunate enough, we'd love to bring in some more local experience as well. Like I said earlier, this isn't just an opportunity for us to start a business. I never would have thought a disabled veteran would be running cannabis companies around the world. I saw it more that I had to, seeing how people were doing poor extraction, how people were being blown up, how this plant wasn't being honored, and especially nurturing the communities that allow it to happen, because you are taking a risk in allowing this. It's not just the 20% on gross receipts for dispensaries that the interest is. Like, we want to have these here long term. Like, you know where they where we live, you know where we sleep. And just like that fig tree here, I remember the first time we were here working about 6 months ago, like seeing that and thinking, what a responsibility to this community that we have to do. So if we are awarded this license, know that it's not just something that we're going to be doing on the weekends. This is something that right now with how California is changing, it's an opportunity for new businesses without past indiscretions to come in and do this correct with the right team, right capital, employing the right individuals, and the tax revenue that we actually make. All of our sales, our corporate offices here, all of that intellectual property, all of those sales, even if this scales potentially coastal to other coastals, coast to coast, all of that will still come back and be rooted in Santa Barbara. And really, again, thankful for the opportunity to be this far and for all of your questions and comments. It's our job to listen to you. We can't do this without you and your community and support, and we really appreciate you sharing and would continue to work with you in the future.
Thank you. I think
Super.
Okay, just to conclude, just to wrap up here. So, just as a reminder, there is information out there on this process and on the ordinance itself for folks to take a look. And if you do want to continue to provide public comment, you can do so through the mail at the address there, or through the dedicated email address specific to this project, ccbpea@santabarbaraca.gov. So thank you to your team. Appreciate it. And with that, we're adjourned.
Thank you.